everyone, I'm Matt and welcome to the Good Trouble Show. Today is Oscar Sunday, yay, and we celebrate this year's greatest films. In the future, in the not too distant future, I think, we will foresee UFO documentaries being the mainstay in the best documentary category at the Oscars. A documentary like this.
Darcy Weir is an independent researcher and filmmaker who has traveled around the world to study the UFO phenomenon.
Back in August of 2020, under a shroud of secrecy, the UAP task force was clandestinely brought into existence within the shadows of the enigmatic U.S. Department of Defense. My questions regarding this phenomenon led me to American oceanographer and retired Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet. How long did you serve for the Navy and work for NOAA?
I served in the Navy for 32 years, and I then worked for NOAA after that for about 3.5 years. They're coming from somewhere. We don't know how they're doing what they're doing, and we don't know their intentions. So all I can say is this deserves a significant amount of study of our oceans, and that's what I'm pursuing right now.
When you hear about Navy submarine seamen witnessing or noticing on sonar USO activity, objects that are moving, 300 knots plus.
I won't use the gentleman's name, even though he's mentioned it publicly and has been in print, that during some testing in on the Los Angeles class improved 688 Los Angeles class fast tug submarine, the USS Hampton, I think it's SSN 767. They were doing something new with the sonar, and an object was being picked up on sonar as a fast mover, and it went zipping by them. And the sonar operator said that went by us at in excess of 800 miles an hour.
Now, I heard through the grapevine that you had a experience with what some people call a fast mover in the Navy. Can you?
Yes, I can tell you about that.
What are your thoughts on the USO situation? I mean, I film here nightly, and it's almost every night you catch something that you can't explain. Why do you think that the water is so important to these craft? What's it about our oceans that attract them to it?
Personally, I believe that they exist. They reside in our oceans. I believe that they have bases or underground facilities.
There is, in my view, based on the data of USO activity, there is a very good reason to believe that there are multiple undersea bases that these things operate at. Yes. Now, and some of them would be definitely off the coast of South America on the Atlantic side. I don't think there's any question in my mind. There's been too many of those types of cases. So you're talking about a global presence. What are they doing? What's going on?
Yeah, this is really going to be it is a great film. I've already seen it. So, but first, before we dig into that, please hit the subscribe and thumbs up button on YouTube. You can also find us on Twitter at Good Trouble Show and all other social media platforms at The Good Trouble Show. We always appreciate a comment, share, like, give a thumbs up, all that good stuff. That really helps us out. You can also find us on your favorite podcasting platforms. Just search for The Good Trouble Show. Subscribe, leave a review. We always appreciate that. You can also become a supporter of The Good Trouble Show by going to www.patreon.com/The Good Trouble Show. And for the price of a coffee, you can support our work. Finally, on YouTube, Super Chats are open and are a great way to show your financial appreciation for our work. We always love that and really appreciate it. I also want to thank our financial supporters on Patreon and YouTube. We had somebody just join on YouTube today. And of course, as always, we really appreciate our chat moderators who volunteer their time to come and keep an eye on the chat room and keep it sane and cordial and all of that good stuff. So today's guest is a researcher and documentary filmmaker who has spent the last 2 decades creating films on intriguing topics like UFOs. Please welcome the director of Transmedium Fastmovers and USOs, Darcy Weir. Darcy, how are you, sir?
Good, Matt. How you doing?
I'm very well, thanks. I have to say, so I had Admiral Tim Gallaudet on my show, and I continually during that interview just butchered his last name right and left. For some reason, I have an issue with last names sometimes. So, but yeah, it was good to see that you got it right.
Yeah, well, I've been trying. I get self-conscious about pronouncing his name as well, but the reason why I got that interview with him was actually thanks to you. I watched your show. I watched the interview with Tim. I had heard about him through the community, and I was like, wow, I got to talk to this guy because I'm already working on this feature-length doc about USOs and what's going on in the oceans. So I reached out to you, and you basically said, yeah, you can have his email. I don't know if he's going to talk to you, but he did. So
awesome.
Thanks so much for making that connection, man. You're very important to the community.
Well, thank you. You're welcome. And to be honest, I don't even remember doing this. I get so many emails and messages, and like I say, it's literally a one-man show. You and I spoke about that. It's the same for you. You're doing all of this on your own. And as I always tell people, I feel like half the time I'm drinking from a fire hose, and there's so much stuff I miss. I know. But anyway, you're very welcome. I'm glad that worked out. I knew that Tim's story was incredibly important to tell. So before we dig into your film, what is your take on Friday's Arrow historical report from Dr. Sean Quadcopter?
Dirt Patrick, I think some people have been calling him.
Kirk
Thanks
Quadcopter.
to Jeremy Corbell.
Yeah.
I think it's unfortunate. I think a lot of people saw that coming, and it's just a repeat in history. I mean, we've been lied to for many, many, many decades now. And why would they want to hand over the keys to the car now? They like driving it, right? And
that's for sure.
The truth is out there. I was talking with like Dave Foley or something on Twitter the other day, and he was saying it was frustrating. And I was like, yeah, it's like you're seeing something, a phenomenon, and many of the people out there are experiencers, physically see this, and you're being told by people who don't see this, it doesn't exist. So it's just unfair. And I think they do know it exists. I think they do have the data, but they sit on it, and it's so siloed and compartmentalized that they don't have to read you into it. You don't have the need to know, as they used to say.
Yeah, that is for sure. You're talking about they like to drive it. One thing I do know is the Pentagon likes to drive a bunch of bullshit and shovel it on the American people. We know at least Susan Go does. And as we spoke about on the show last night with Ross Coulthart and Gary Nolan, it is truly a travesty. I don't know if they just think that in general we are that stupid, or the people in general across the world that are watching what the Pentagon has to say. It was a joke. It was a complete joke. And
believe it or not, I was actually hopeful years ago when Bill Nelson, the NASA administrator, spoke out publicly about his interest in the UAP subject. He announced that he had spoken to the fighter pilots like David Fravor and Alex Dietrich and Ryan Graves. And, he thought there's something here to the UAP subject. And at that point, I was researching NASA's history in anomalies, UFOs in space. And I reached out to NASA, and their PR person just said, like, you can't speak to Bill Nelson, refer to our website for our PR disclaimer regarding our ongoing UAP investigation. But, when I saw James Fox go to that conference, the UAP panel that they did, I think it was last year, and Bill Nelson was quite negative and rude towards James regarding his question about David Grush coming forward. And
I remember that.
Yeah, that's when I completely lost all hope in NASA doing the right thing. It seemed like they were going to do something, but I think they're just information controllers like the Pentagon is. And I think they will only disclose what serves them.
Yeah, 100%. I can tell you for sure, Sean Kirkpatrick is not an honest player. You can take that to the bank, and stuff will be coming out, further stuff about Dr. Kirkpatrick, and it is not a good look. That's all I have to say. So how did, Darcy, how did you get in, what sort of got your interest peaked in the UFO topic? Is this something that started when you were a kid, or what is your story as far as how you got interested in this whole crazy thing?
The phenomenon. Well, I am a kid at heart. I don't know if I'll ever grow up, but basically when I was in university, I actually was studying astrobiology 101. It was an elective. And believe it or not, that book is called Life in the Universe, and it's penned by Seth Shostak, who I ended up getting to interview for one of my recent documentaries. A lot of the same, what he's been saying for the past few decades. There's nothing to see here. It's all prosaic.
Of course. People
believe what they want to believe. Yeah. But I wanted to have his testimony in an overall doc regarding space and possible ET, involvement. And, but yeah, it was interesting, just full circle to go through that journey, read his book in university, which basically says, look, the math says with the Drake equation and all these other probabilities that we can't be alone in the universe. Like in our galaxy alone, there has to be millions of civilizations like us that live around a star like ours, that possibly evolved like us using technology, have not destroyed themselves yet, and might be traveling through the stars, right? So that's really where my interest started. I'll be honest, my older brother, got me into it too. He started forwarding me these like YouTube documentaries and stuff. Back in the day, it was like Jose Escamilla's The Greatest Story Never Told, UFO videos and stuff. And I was hooked. So I've just been telling my own stories for the years that have gone by, and traveling down the rabbit hole of what I find interesting in the phenomenon. And there's just so many different slices that you can examine in this sort of onion, this cornucopia of information.
It is certainly one big ass rabbit hole, that's for sure. And man, I can't keep up with it half the time. I try to do it with Twitter, but man, especially lately, all this stuff just comes out so quickly. It's literally like drinking from a fire hose half the time. Now, before we get into your film, I understand that you've done actually quite a few of these documentaries, not only on UFO. So tell us a bit about some of your other work.
Sure. I started off talking about like underground bases with a pretty controversial figure named Phil Schneider. I don't believe everything he said, but I think the story of him talking about, this new world order and information control and UFOs and the government controlling the narrative and all that stuff, that was on point. And I went from there and did a documentary on abduction called Being Taken. I interviewed Travis Walton, Kathleen Marden, Stanton Friedman while he was still around. Great guy, such a deep understanding of the phenomenon, and a fellow Canadian. And then, I did other documentaries that are just completely different, like a Bitcoin documentary, because I'm interested in cryptocurrency and pretty much a lot of different fringe ideas out there. And then like I said, I did some sort of NASA anomaly UFO history stuff with this series called Secret Space UFOs. And now I'm just turning my eyes and ears and attention towards the USO or just ocean-based phenomenon. And it's just so interesting that there's such a vast history of that. And if you look at these thought leaders in the phenomenon, like Lou Elizondo, for example, he was questioned about, what book could most closely describe what's going on with this phenomenon. And he said, you should read Chains of the Sea. And
I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, it's a fiction, but essentially what happens in that story, extraterrestrial craft land in 4 different cities around the world. And at this point in time in history, we have artificial intelligence and humans are here. We interact with those craft by humans attacking them and the AI setting up communication. When that happens, the non-human intelligence that's extraterrestrial says, hey, guess what? You don't rule this planet. A different non-human intelligence that's been here for a lot longer does. And it's not the AI either. So that was an interesting thing for him to say. And I think he said it was only like 25% accurate or something like that. But then you look at, I spoke to my friend Richard Dolan in this documentary, somebody who's been examining the UFO phenomenon in the national security state for a long time. And he said, you should read Ivan T. Sanderson's book called Invisible Residents. That also discusses a non-human intelligence and, cases of USO or UFO activity coming from the oceans. And that is a ufologist in this case. Then you've got Hal Puthoff, who wrote a paper about ultra-terrestrials. And Hal's been, connected to this phenomenon in some way or another. That paper discusses the notion that there's something that might be here that's like a crypto-terrestrial, something that's lived alongside us for just as long or longer maybe, but in a different domain. And an ocean is a possible domain that, look, 70% of our planet is covered in oceans, and we don't typically go there. We sit on top, we go over top, we go into it, but we still haven't fully examined it. And I think there is a possibility that this could be a place to harbor, a safe place to stay out of sight and out of sound for some form of non-human intelligence. Is it something that's extraterrestrial? I don't know. Is it something that's extra dimensional? Who knows?
Who knows?
I think the information is very well siloed and compartmentalized and kept in this, Manhattan Project style project management system that the DoD and the intelligence agencies still run on.
What was your sort of moment where you decided, you know what, my next film, I want to make it about USOs?
I think, just listening to the testimony and looking at even the recent phenomenon. Like, if you look at even the Tic Tac UFO incident, Chris Sharp from Liberation Times, he published an article about how apparently there was a scientific analysis that was conducted regarding that Tic Tac incident. And, these papers aren't public yet, but from the testimony he received from an insider, those Tic Tacs were coming out of an object that was in the ocean. And if you look at Major Fravor's testimony and Alex Dietrich, they saw that object hovering over the water, and at the congressional hearing, they said, we thought maybe this object was sitting above a larger object that was just under the ocean surface. So I think even since the Tic Tac incident, I had in the back of my mind, there's something going on with our oceans. Like, why is it constantly there? That recently and far back, we have recordings of different naval vessels from even the 1800s to 1600s, where they identified some anomalous object flying in and out of the oceans.
Yeah, it's interesting, you know. So I'm not a ufologist. I'm not a researcher. I consider myself more of a hack of a talk show host. So I'm always learning something new. But when I started digging into this initially, I had no idea about the USO phenomenon. Like most of the things that I read and podcasts that I listened to, of course, were for the most part about the airborne aspect of the phenomenon, UAPs. How difficult was it to find information about the underwater aspect of this?
Well, it's still incredibly difficult. The testimony I got that proved that there's something in the ocean, like I said, we do have the Tic Tac incident where that's spoken of. You have gentlemen like Marc D'Antonio, who rode a submarine for his first time on a naval exercise. He can't say exactly why he was invited and what the sort of mission was, but he experienced a USO in the ocean. And, you know, the sonar, what do you call it? Sonar operator was screaming, you know, Mayday, Mayday, fast mover, which I think is a code name for these objects that are shooting through the ocean at anywhere between 300 to 800 miles per hour. And with our own technology, our torpedoes that have supercavitation technology, which creates an envelope in front of them, they can go a max of like 170 miles per hour. So what is this? You know, that right. Is an unidentified object under the ocean, in the ocean.
And actually, we have that clip with Marc D'Antonio. So let's watch this.
I didn't want to jeopardize that, but something made me ask, and I immediately went, "Oh, since like that, like I shouldn't have asked." And I think he picked up on that. He kind of smiled. He goes, "I'm sorry, Mark, I can't talk about that program."
This is the second in command for the Navy?
Yes, and he.
What's his name?
I can't give that to you. Okay, because you probably can research it, but it was decades
What year?
ago. This was decades ago. I can't talk about that. It was the nature of my trip, the nature, I can't talk. And that's part of the problem, isn't it, with this world? People will doubt anything you say if you can't give them all the details.
Mm-hmm.
You know, well, I'm sorry, that's just what has to be lived with.
It's classified.
It is, I can't talk about it.
And you have a non-disclosure agreement?
Well, you have a non-jail time agreement. If you violate that, you're going to jail, you know, and I get mad when I see politicians violate this and nothing happens to them. Mm-hmm. But if I violate it, I'm going right to the can, you know, so I've never done that. I never will. I can't.
Yeah, I love that, a go to jail agreement. Yeah, it's always so funny. You hear, especially the debunkers and you know, that whole wacky group, they're always saying, well, if they know everything, just reveal it all. And it's ridiculous that these people would think that folks that do have this knowledge would risk going to Leavenworth. It's just insane. They don't mess around when it comes to these security agreements.
Yeah, jail time's not fun, I don't think. No one's interested in jail time. And when it comes to the national security issue of releasing this data, I'm sure there's multiple reasons why. I'm open to the idea that there are super top secret reverse engineering programs where we have technology that can do this stuff. And we don't want our adversaries to know that. So sometimes we call it a UFO or a USO so that it confuses our adversaries when they hear about it through, whatever source. But the cases that go back before we had anything close to this technology, like I was saying, in the 1800s, there was a naturalist, Andrew Bloxham, who sailed from England to Hawaii, and he recorded this sphere that was bright like a sun, orangish in color, and middle of the night, pitch black. This thing comes out of the ocean, drops down into the ocean, comes back, and illuminates the whole deck of the ship. You've got Christopher Columbus on one of his voyages across the Atlantic, trying to find the New America. They saw a UFO over the ocean, and this was recorded in one of his shipmates' logs. So there's something going on that's been here for a long time that can't be explained by just our own super top secret technology. And I think if it is something that's more secret than nuclear bomb technology, as people have discussed in the past, since the Manhattan Project, since the 1940s, then I think it does have the ability to maybe destabilize our world economies if we got off of something like a fossil fuel technology and started switching to something that was far more efficient and long lasting and cheap.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, and cheap, like if it was less expensive than our current fossil fuel industry.
Got it. Yeah, no, I agree. I think that a lot of people have raised the sort of economic implications of all of this coming out. So in all of the folks that you spoke with about USOs, what was the sort of, I would say, most surprising or perhaps concerning thing that you heard about these things operating under our oceans?
Well, other than the fact that they outmaneuver and outperform any of our ocean-based technology, like our Los Angeles class submarines and such that have nuclear cores, they're nuclearly powered and all that jazz. I think when I was talking to Tim, and he mentioned that he thinks there is evidence, like the Catalina Island off the coast there seems to be some kind of structure that's under the water. He did send some of that information over to NOAA, and scientists confirmed to him that this doesn't look like a natural structure. That, and what else did he also said that he believes the data that's being collected in regards to fast movers or USOs, that possibly goes to a third party corporation or agency that feeds, their client would be people like the DIA, the military, the Navy, that type of thing. He thinks he's found the source of the data that's being recorded regarding these objects in our oceans. And so I hope he follows up and is able to get access to some of that and find out what's going on.
I actually, when I saw that, when I watched your film, I actually did a bit of research, and I actually think that the outfit that does this, what you were just speaking about, I don't have this up on my laptop to bring up, but I believe it is the Farragut Technical Analysis Center, which is the U.S. Navy's Center for Excellence for Strategic, Scientific, and Technical Intelligence, ST&I, analysis of foreign technologies, sensors, weapons, platforms, combat systems, C4SR. In addition, I'm reading from their website here, or where I found this, which is oni.navy.mil. The Farragut technical analysis, in addition to all its source capabilities, it conducts O&I's foreign material exploitation and signal analysis, and is home to the National Acoustic Intelligence Laboratory, whose acronym is NAIL. Farragut is one of the 5 centers of excellence that are distinct commands under the Office of Naval Intelligence. So I don't know, it might be something, I didn't dig into it more than that, so perhaps some of our listeners here or viewers can do a little bit of research on that. But when I dug around that, it took a while, but I think that might be where Tim was talking about, but who knows?
I don't know. I mean, he alluded it to being something like the National Geospatial Agency, right?
Right.
Which is where David Grush supposedly worked for, and they fed information into multiple other clients, right? So could be some kind of setup like that for the Navy. Yeah. We'll see. We'll see if we get more information. I hope that Navy men who watch my documentary and have evidence of this can bring it out to the public, you know, send it to me, send it to Jeremy Corbell, send it to whoever you think could leak this information responsibly. And one of the people I highlighted in the documentary, Andy Marcial, I just want to give him a shout out. He was responsible for leaking the 3 now pretty famous UAP videos from the Department of Homeland Security. And he went about that the right way. He sent it to the SCU, and they fully analyzed it and vetted this DHS agent before they released their study on it. And then, yeah, he released it to the public. So I think we just need more people like that get access to this stuff, just like Jeremy Corbell has been doing.
And we actually have a clip of your interview with Andy. Let's roll that.
You know, usually, for example, like Tic Tac or whatever is a few seconds and that's it, you know? So I realized, okay, I have to do something with this footage and not just throw it out there. Like I want to go through the correct avenues to actually get this properly analyzed before I put it out there, because it's important. I knew that this was something that really needed to be put in the hands of people that were going to take it serious and analyze it for real because of its importance. And that's when I had gotten in contact with an individual at the SCU, the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, named Peter Reale, and sent him the footage, got him, introduced him to the source, which wanted to remain anonymous, but through them, you know, I was able to convince him to verify, and who he was, and show them all the information they needed to see in order to verify that, yes, the source is who he says he is, and we're getting this from an authentic individual in Department of Homeland Security.
Why does the object look like it's 2 objects at certain times, like a little ball and then like this kind of like bell underneath it?
It's because it actually is 2 objects, but the analysis showed that the bottom is separate from the top. So somehow it's one object, but there's
working
no
together.
Yeah, it's almost like working together, because they weren't able to find any evidence of anything that was attaching the 2 together. So you have a larger and then a smaller orb at the top, and as you can see, they're working together because they rotate as they're moving.
So
wow. Yeah, so is that the same video that I've seen that is they call like the duck video? Is that the same object?
Yeah, rubber duck. And
rubber duck, okay.
Something that's prominent about that, as Andy was saying, most of these leaked videos that came out through Christopher Mellon and Lou Elizondo, they're only, seconds long, and under a minute. And so you look at this video and some of the other stuff that Andy brought forward, and it's long. Like the rubber duck is 40 minutes of footage. So the SCU had a lot of footage to analyze there and debunk this as, what Mick West would call a balloon, or like a cartel drone or something, parachuting some drugs across the Arizona border. But if it was a drone, it would be showing some kind of heat, because I have a drone. I used it for some of the B-roll footage in my doc that just came out. And, you know, that thing gets hot when it lands, you pick it up. If you touch the motors, you're going to burn your fingers. So they emanate some kind of heat. And when this was in black hot, or I think white hot mode, the FLIR technology, it wasn't picking up any heat. It was completely cold. And this thing is going against the wind, you know, 100, almost 200 miles per hour. So what is it? It's unidentified. It's some kind of UAP.
Yeah, and certainly we know that Mick West's seagulls generate heat when they're flying around. Now, do you think that the Navy is even more secretive than the United States Air Force when it comes to this?
Yeah, and I think the Navy has been fed a lot of data from NASA over the years. It usually was the Navy. The Navy was our first real military supremacy on the planet, right? The oceans were that frontier that man had never been before we went to space. And so the navies were always the top of the command chain. The Air Force was a newer formation, obviously. And now we've got Space Force, which is the sixth branch. And they're all supposed to be united in their information. But I think the Navy has been sitting on mountains of data that's very classified, I'm sure.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all. Now, Darcy, what about the other navies from other countries? Have you heard or received any sort of information about other countries that are, you know, both friendly and adversarial to the United States having these same sorts of encounters?
So Richard Dolan did go over some cases in the documentary. There was a case that came out of Russia. Vladimir Zaza, who was a former high-ranking general for the former Soviet Union, he discussed an object that blasted out of the ice. It was a sphere sort of object by a Navy vessel in the Arctic, I think just north of Russia there. So they have been noticing this. They've also detected USOs for sure. I'm fairly confident Canada has a lot of information like this. You know, I interviewed Chris Stiles, who's a longtime researcher. He's Nova Scotia, Canadian man. And he did the Shag Harbor incident, which is about an object, possibly two, that were seen by hundreds of residents. It's a mass witness sighting from 1967. An object went down into the ocean. The locals reported it. The Coast Guard got involved, and eventually NATO. It was a joint NATO operation between the United States, Canada, and they even sent divers down to see, wow, you know, was this a craft that was civilian or commercial that went down? Let's save them. And apparently the divers witnessed something that was non-human. It really freaked them out. Chris Stiles, there's documentaries about the Shag Harbor incident. They're, you know, feature length, and Chris has been involved. I got to interview him for the documentary. He just released a book called Clean Sweep 5, where he looked through sort of Canadian Freedom of Information Act requests, old documentation of other naval encounters that happened off the coast of Canada. And he found one from 1960 called the Shelburne incident. And through his information he received, he found that if you look this up on Wikipedia, and I'm sure you know Wikipedia is no credible source these days.
Oh, I'm very familiar with Wikipedia and what's going on there.
Yeah. You'll find that when it comes to DEFCON levels, we've never hit DEFCON 5 supposedly in history. And what Chris Stiles uncovered is that during this Shelburne incident in 1960, 7 years prior to the Shag Harbor incident, they had a very similar situation where a craft went into the ocean and they sent divers down. And when the divers came back up shortly thereafter, something spooked the ship so bad that they went on high alert and issued DEFCON 5. That's in the logs, but on Wikipedia, it says we've never done that. So pretty interesting stories.
Yeah, no, that is for sure. Darcy, have you found that there are any particular hot spots in the ocean where this stuff seems to like to hang out?
Yeah, absolutely. One that comes to mind is the Bermuda Triangle. Near Puerto Rico, we've been hearing about all kinds of activity happening in the ocean off the coast there. And, James Cameron wrote in the beginning of his film, The Abyss, about that encounter that actually happened in history where a submarine went missing in the Bermuda Triangle, just completely disappeared. So I don't know, James has been doing a lot of different features about aliens over the years, and he's very interested in our oceans, and he's dove to the abyss, to the bottom of the trench. And so why is he so interested? Does he know about something that's going on in our oceans? I don't know.
I certainly wouldn't be surprised. I've often thought that Steven Spielberg, that somebody clearly had to have spoken to him when he created Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I know we've heard people like Lou Elizondo say that it was pretty amazing how accurate his depiction of UFO or UAP activity in the film,
yeah,
and how they fly around and all of that sort of stuff. So
actually,
go ahead.
Something that's really interesting regarding that. I spoke to Robbie Graham, who's now passed. He was a researcher who wrote about the Hollywood and the fascination about UFOs there. He wrote a book called Silver Screen Saucers, I think. And he researched and interviewed people from Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the Steven Spielberg film, people that were involved. And he found evidence and documentation that even back then, the military, the Air Force, did not want him to make that film. They didn't want to support it financially. They wrote him a letter and said, don't make this film, and we're not going to lend you our equipment or facilities or anything as you requested, because we wrote our summation during Project Blue Book, and that's the final answer on that. When he reached out to NASA, NASA wrote a 25-page response pleading with him not to make the film because, because they did not want any more attention to this phenomenon, and they didn't want more calls about UFO activity. So there's something there in Hollywood, and I think Steven has definitely been read in by some insiders to some degree, and he has experienced the resistance to this truth over the decades, for sure, especially starting back when he did Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
There was some interview that I saw, I think it was maybe about a year, 2 years. Oh, you know what? It was the Late Show with I think Stephen Colbert, but it was a sit-down interview. I think it was at his home or something like that. But yeah, he essentially, or not essentially, he said flat out that he believes that the government is hiding all of this. And something tells me he was not speaking, just making it up. I imagine someone like him and his influence, media influence, I would imagine that there are a lot of people in the know that speak to him about this kind of stuff.
Totally. And I think prominent filmmakers like Denis Villeneuve, you see little tones of ufology and that type of thing in his films. The new Blade Runner film, the drones off in the distance in this future dystopia, in some shots look like a shining like UFO. And in the new Dune film, there's that anti-gravitic technology that these soldiers are using to scale the side of a mesa, and you're like, wow, okay, this he knows he probably knows ufology pretty well, and is just incorporating some of that, the idea of future technology that people have experienced with their own eyes when looking at this phenomenon into the mythos that he's building in his films.
Yeah, as I mentioned last night on the show, I've had these UAPs show up above my home around 10 times, and that over, I think, like the past 2 years. It's always been an orb. I've never seen anything solid, but my wife's been there to witness it. We had a family friend that was outside when it showed up, and as I said, I certainly don't need Big Daddy government or President Biden or whoever to tell me this is real. I've seen it, I know it, and yeah, I've seen enough. I'd be happy if nothing else shows up again. That would be fine. Now, when I was at Seoul, I did have the pleasure of talking to Tim Gallaudet. One of the first things I said was, man, I'm really sorry for butchering your last name on my show. I was not being a very good, well-prepared talk show host. But I want to play the clip that you provided with your interview with Tim. And I think Admiral Gallaudet is so important in this conversation because he has worked in the Navy. He's been a career Navy guy. He retired, I think, probably 1 or 2 years ago, I think. But he was a rear admiral in the Navy. He was the administrator of NOAA during the Trump administration. This guy, much like David Grush, he has incredible credentials, and Lou Elizondo as well. But I think I would say for sure, out of anyone that are sort of former government people, he truly has, truly is coming from a place of credibility that is just totally difficult to argue with or try to debunk the guy. So anyway, let's watch this clip. I just love this. Here we go.
These listening networks of devices, they have cataloged all of the biologics, and they've cataloged all of the equipment that's known, right? Especially for the Navy, you guys have to know what the Russians are driving, what the Chinese, what, anybody who has an aquatic force.
Yeah, that's the Office of Naval Intelligence. They're really good at that, and that's their job.
So you're of the mind that when we see these objects going through our oceans at 500 knots, which we're only able to send things like, for example, a submarine can go maybe a max of 35 to 40 knots. And then maybe the Russians have these torpedoes that they create an air bubble in front of, and those can go up to 200 miles or something like that, which I think is 100 knots or something like that, 150 knots, something like that.
Yeah, that's called supercavitation. I'm not going to comment on our own force or adversary capabilities in terms of numbers, but I'll say yes, that we have capabilities that currently the phenomena we're seeing far exceed.
Yeah, far exceeds, that is for sure. And the thing that, because you'll hear all these debunkers talk about, Mick West, his latest theory on the gimbal thing is multiple military sensor platforms all failed at the same time, which just blows me away. So these multi-million-dollar platforms that are built to military or mil-spec standards just happen to all fail at the same time. That's how desperate this entire professional debunker community, because I'm quite confident a lot of them are paid for their efforts. So
the problem with his argument is that he wants us to follow, I guess, Occam's razor, which is the simplest explanation. Don't create multiple unnecessary entities to explain something, right? That's kind of what Occam's razor is saying. But by saying that it has to be accounted for by multiple different sensor failures for these, state-of-the-art FLIR technologies and so on, you're basically creating unnecessary entities if you have to rely on that theory. So just that fails in itself. And you're also discounting the eyewitness testimony and saying that there's a failure there. And other sensor data that's not related to the FLIR, like radar, that got the Navy to send these F-18s out there to investigate in the first place.
Excellent point. Yeah, that is for sure. These debunkers, half the time, I think they live in a hypocritical world. But that is a very, very good point. And one of the things that I pointed out about Mick is you hear him say, oh, I'll believe it when I see all the data. However, Mick and these debunkers, they know they will never see all of the data because so much of that data is classified. And of course, they're working from the place that they've already predetermined for themselves that all of this is fake or seagulls or whatever. And what they do is they just continually move the goalpost to make whatever evidence is out there fit their conclusion. And and I think we saw a lot of that with Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. That is for sure. So Darcy, I'm curious, did you come across any information about USOs disabling any of our nuclear fleet? In other words, so in our Navy, a lot of our ships are driven by nuclear propulsion, aircraft carriers, destroyers, of course, our fast attack and sea launch ballistic missile subs. Those are all driven by nuclear reactors as opposed to diesel. They're quieter, all that sort of thing. Have you heard, and this is something I've wondered for quite some time, have you heard any reports of USOs or UAPs flying over these craft and disabling their nuclear propulsion systems?
So I haven't heard of them disabling, but just by the fact that there are shooting by one that is running with some kind of nuclear capacity, either thermonuclear warheads or its engine is nuclear, sort of speaks volumes. I mean, you've got Marc D'Antonio's example. When I released the trailer there, you played earlier, Jim Goodall is talking about a case with the USS Hampton, the SN 767. This incident was reported by Bob McGuire, who watched the trailer. He reached out to me after and was like, Darcy, that was actually me. And I was like, oh.
That's a good impression of science, Bob.
I was like, wow, okay, that's small world. All right, there you go. And I think the weird thing about that too is that you've got two men that have gone on their very first journey on a submarine, and a USO is picked up. So it must be pretty dang common. I think the people that are living in those for bigger portions of the year are probably hearing those detections they've been hearing them for extended amounts of time. I will say though, somebody who probably does know more about deactivated submarines, or maybe even our carriers being swarmed by UFOs that have nuclear capabilities, is Richard Dolan. He's currently working on a USO book. I've taken a look at the manuscript. I don't want to say anything except for that, my documentary profiles a large amount of cases, which pales in comparison to what he's writing about. He's got 600 cases.
Wow.
So yeah. And they're all different, types of eyewitness and testimonies. So look out for that one.
Yeah. And we actually, of course, we have a clip of that. And I've been following Richard for a while. I would certainly love to have him on the show. The work he does on this topic is just second to none. So let's watch the clip from your documentary here with Richard Dolan.
Quietly talk to a researcher and get the story out. Often, you've got the main navies of the world, predominantly the United States Navy, which has a global presence. They're encountering this stuff. And I've collected a lot of U.S. Navy USO reports, unofficial. And and this is the problem with a lot of these USO cases. Like, we really have to be fair in describing how difficult it is to get documentation on a lot of these cases.
Right.
It's not like you can file a FOIA request and get something on other types of UFO encounters. There's very little FOIA activity that I've been aware of that deals with USO cases, and the definite message that comes through over and over again is that the secrecy on these is very, very severe. Records get taken out, they get expunged, logbooks get switched out, and this type of thing. So there's a lot of management over the information with these things. And so almost typically, classically, the way these stories will come out is an ex-Navy guy, 20, 30 years after the fact, will quietly talk to a researcher and get the story out, often under anonymity.
Yeah, so clearly there are a lot of former servicemen, former Navy folks that have run into this sort of thing. Do you think that we will see more and more people come forward with their encounters when they were in the service?
I hope so. Look, we've got people like Jeremy Corbell, right? He released his earlier UFO-related documentaries, and people saw them that were servicemen, and they said, hey, I want to release some information to this guy because he seems to know what's up. So that's how he's getting this stuff. He's getting footage just like Andy Marcial, my friend, got from a DHS agent. There's people that are working within these different slices of, our security or intelligence agencies, and they want this information to be out there because it has huge implications for, our existence and the possibilities of technology and our future as, I guess, mankind, right? People are motivated in an altruistic way to leak this data and get it to the public so we know there's something greater going on here, right? Look, Larry Maguire, I'm a Canadian. Please, man, call me up. Let's talk about what you know. This is a gentleman you probably met at Saul who wrote that letter to Anita Anand, who's the Minister of Defense for Canada. It's kind of like our defense, I guess, like the head of the DOD for Canada, imploring her to release and start informing the Canadian public more on the UAP or UFO issue, and going through our recorded records through our military and so on, and getting out some of that information in lockstep with maybe the American government. Now, after the Arrow report came out, maybe she's read that and says, maybe we won't be doing that. But I hope that there are people around the world that are witnessing this from different military and intelligence capacities that see documentaries or hear about reports in the news. Like the Debrief just did that article on the 2023 January Gulf of Mexico incident, the Elgin Air Force Base scramble to intercept 4 UAPs over the Gulf there. And this is what Matt Gaetz went to Elgin Air Force Base to get read in on. And, that illustration has been encircling the Twitter and social media community regarding UFOs right now. We just need more data like that to come out. And I think, if anything, the Arrow report has probably frustrated so many people that it's going to happen that way. I really do hope that more of these whistleblowers in the 40 that supposedly David Grush had communicated with while carrying out his tasks for the UAP task force, more of those individuals come forward.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. Yeah, part of the whole issue, and we spoke about it a little bit earlier, is, these folks, they don't want to go to jail. So they've got external pressure for, most people obviously aren't going to know who these folks are, but there's pressure to try and move the ball forward, and they have information that they know if they go public will move the ball forward. But, you know, they're in a catch-22. They don't want to go to jail. And I know a lot of these folks have existing cases with the Inspector General. A lot of these folks, they knew that Arrow was a ruse, and they knew that Sean Kirkpatrick was dirty as hell and not... He wasn't who he says he is. We'll just put it that way. So these folks completely bypassed Arrow, completely bypassed Kirkpatrick because they knew it was a trap, and they went straight to the Inspector General and filed PPD-19s. But you know that's the whole issue. So they don't want to risk going to jail through doing it or through a unauthorized disclosure, and then also too, if they have existing cases with the Inspector General because they filed PPD-19s, also the last thing they want to do is go public, even anonymously in some way, and have that jeopardize their case with the Inspector General. Because it's I think with all of this, it's such a small group of people, would probably not be that difficult for the Inspector General to figure out, oh, this guy, I've got his case, and this is what came out on Twitter. I think it's the same guy. So it's a bit of a quandary, but I certainly hope something like that does happen. My hope is that a lot of these folks that are very well versed in whatever security classification guide that they had to read when being signed or being read into this program, they know what the limits are, and hopefully they can maybe walk whatever they want to talk about up to the limit that wouldn't cross that red line. Now, going back to the nuclear thing. So on our show, we have really had a pretty great interest in the UFO nuclear connection. I've been a student of U.S. and Russian nuclear policy since the early 90s. I know all of the platforms, that sort of thing. And we've had the pleasure of having people on like, we interviewed Robert Hastings. We've interviewed David Schindley, a U.S. Air Force, retired U.S. Air Force nuclear launch control officer. And there is a very clear documented history of UFOs tampering and or disabling our strategic nuclear weapons. One thing I've always been curious about is if this is happening above our land-based strategic nuclear deterrent, I would be wildly surprised if it hasn't been occurring with our sea-launched nuclear deterrent. Have you heard anything about that, of USOs disabling and or tampering with our sea-launched nuclear ballistic missiles?
I have not.
Yeah, that would definitely be interesting to see. So in general, Darcy, do you think the Navy views this as a security threat, or do you think they just view it as just a natural phenomenon like whales floating around in the ocean and just ignore it and drive your submarine past them?
Yeah, I think it is the latter. I think they are kind of ignoring it and maybe filing it for a later threat assessment. But if you look at what they did with space, for example, I documented this in one of my recent documentaries in the Secret Space UFOs series. And I was talking to Bob McGuire, who worked for the NRO. He basically said that there were filters in our satellite and our ground-based systems that were turned on to stop alerting those listening and monitoring systems of objects that were going to and from the Earth, which seemed to be like intelligently controlled UFOs. But they put on that filter because I guess a long time ago they deemed these are not actually a security threat, and we want to pay attention to what is being launched, let's say, from China or Russia, or what's, seems to be orbiting that could be run by one of those adversaries, right? Known capabilities, they're kind of like monitoring that type of stuff, probably in the ocean as well.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder as well if the U.S. military, as a sort of normal operating procedure. They've decided it is best to ignore this stuff and not interact with it. I don't know if it's not to provoke it or what. But then you hear cases like you just spoke about with Eglin Air Force Base, where they scrambled fighters to intercept these things. And yeah, so I've always just tried to kind of figure out, well, where from a military perspective are they coming from? So we have some listener questions, if you don't mind. I'd love to
Sure.
float those your way. Okay, this is from Uplifting Tweets. Question: I've heard that Darcy is incredible with impressions. Can he please do a Kirkpatrick impression?
I have not studied Kirkpatrick well enough to do one. Unfortunately, I think he kind of looks at everything like this. In a lot of his photos, he's kind of looking like this, and I think he speaks with a bit of an accent, but that's about it. That's all I can do.
I think all you need to do to impersonate Sean Kirkpatrick is just you don't even need like any sort of vocal training. Just spew out a bunch of bullshit and you will be Sean Kirkpatrick. That is for sure. So, all right, let's see, moving on. Sam Danner, do these objects travel with impunity in our oceans? Do they hassle our submarine fleet? I think you spoke about that a little bit, but if there's any more you would like to elaborate on that.
Yeah, I think they're curious about what we're doing, and we have all kinds of listening devices and automated UAVs, and we have, the SOSIS network, which is a listening system that's built into the ocean beds around the world to monitor. And I think we pick up these things with all of that type of technology, but it's just being filed away, and it's not for our eyes or ears.
Yeah. Hopefully that will change. I think, and we spoke about this a little bit on yesterday's episode with Gary Nolan and Ross Coulthart. Ross touched on this, that this is not your grandparents' DOD. This is not going back to the 50s where the Pentagon and the CIA can come out and say, there's nothing to see here. And everybody in at least the United States populace goes, okay, yeah, daddy government said there's nothing to see here. We'll just move on and watch Leave It to Beaver. I think in today's society, especially with the speed of how stuff is spread about on social media and whatnot. Yeah, I mean, there's no way of keeping this thing locked down. And the Pentagon they are absolutely fooling themselves. They made such a humongous strategic mistake in what Kirkpatrick put out. I guarantee you the blowback on the Pentagon will be incalculable. They have no idea what is coming. I guarantee that. They really have set themselves up for failure, and to say that they're going to have egg on their face somewhat soon, I think that is an understatement, but you can take that to the bank. Okay, Christian Morales, support Darcy, and thanks, Matt, for reporting. Love the suit. Thank you, Darcy, and thank you for the super chat. Red Panda Koala, thank you for the super chat as well. Great guests. Darcy, how long do your documentaries take to make, and what is your next documentary? And as we spoke about, same as me doing all this on my own, and I know how much work this takes. You're doing the same thing, and I just do this out of my office, so I can't imagine how long this must take for you, and also the resources you have to spend in order to go and perform these interviews and put these things together. Yeah, so how long does this take, and what do you have coming up?
Yeah, it takes anywhere between 6 months to a year for some of my projects. I've been working on one for over a year now. I'm kind of working on a few at the same time. I'm working on one regarding some BS that's happened in the UFO community, like just hucksters and stuff, because that is something that's been going on for a while. You know, there's always liars and charlatans and attention seekers that misinform and attract attention away from what's really going on. So I'm kind of like working on that project and also working on a follow-up to this regarding like Puerto Rico. That one's been really fun so far to shoot and investigate, boots on the ground, you know. And working on another abduction documentary. I'm also very interested in, you know, the idea of ESP, extrasensory perception. And, you know, I spoke with Russ Targ. He invited me into his home in Palo Alto. And I think there's something going on there too with this whole remote viewing thing. So I've been working on something with that. But yeah, just I'm always working on another project. And I guess it takes as long as it takes, like as long as until I get the story right. I don't want to put out something that is missing information or just seems bunk, you know, not really good.
Yeah, no, copy that. So on your next project, that's going to be about what did you call them, grifters or troublemakers? What was the term that you used?
Well, I've been called a grifter. I really think everybody is their own decider on that term, and it's crazy, like the infighting that happens in the Twitter community and the UFO community at large. I've seen it all. I've been interacting with the different people in the different layers of it. You know, you got people that write books and people that make documentaries, people that go to conferences and do lectures, and a lot of people don't like each other, and it's just the way it is.
It's like high school.
Yeah, it's like high school. I have described it as that before. And then UFO Twitter is the same. You just got like groups not liking each other and creating narratives that they, you know, one is evil and the other one's more evil and all this stuff. And it's like, let's just focus on the phenomenon, you know. But that story that I'm working on, I can't really talk about right now. I'll get into it a bit later. But yeah, there's a lot of people that have even come at me over the years and you know, try to tarnish my name, prevent me from being a content creator. If you go to my IMDb, every one of my film pages has been bombed with 1 stars due to somebody that just wants to mess with me. And, you know, we're talking pretty coordinated efforts. Somebody hacked my computer, my main desktop, like beginning of last week. And
really,
so,
what happened?
Yeah. Well, I walked into my office, turned on my television screen that I edit with, like an OLED, and somebody was moving the mouse around, going through my email and all this stuff. It was pretty disconcerting. So I just pulled the Ethernet cord out of the back of it and called up a friend. I used to work in IT and talked to a guy who's a friend who's like a security guy, and he kind of walked me through, well, they probably got into your computer through you opening up a spam email. That's all it takes these days. They just send you spam, you open it, they're in, if you don't have the correct like security and stuff turned on. So I don't know, I'm learning and just moving, rolling with the punches. And the documentaries I'm working on, I'm just trying to make, you know, more interesting and more factual as we go.
Did you have any indication that they had dug through your files, like your media files or anything like that, that would be part of your research?
I mean, I had my Premiere Pro open and some folders and stuff because I'm actively editing, but I have no idea how far. All I know is that they were in my Google Drive and stuff like that. So that was pretty
wow.
That was messed up. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah. Well, that doesn't surprise me. It was about a year ago or so, there were a couple of journalists that I was speaking to that they walked in and had almost the exact same thing. As a matter of fact, one journalist walks in, same thing. He walks up and he sees that he had his email open, and he sees that somebody has gone in, selected all of his emails, hit the delete button on the virtual keyboard, but had not hit return. And he took that as sort of a sign from the gatekeepers, NSA, or whoever, that, you know, we can touch you, we can certainly mess with you. And yeah, man, I'm not surprised by that at all. I know we have had some pretty weird stuff happen here, that is for sure. But yeah, you know, and going back to your original sort of thing that you're working on as far as like the kind of fraudsters, there's this guy named Stephen Greenstreet. I don't know if you've heard about him, but he's this editor. He is actually friends with Susan Go, had done some disinformation. So I don't know if you've heard about this guy, but he might be good for your film. Just a little pro tip for you there.
Well, like, Greenstreet he's a reporter. I guess he's doing his job, and he made an entertaining, funny expose of Skinwalker Ranch, you know. It's pretty, I think it was actually pretty well done. I'd say we actually do need skeptics and debunkers, because it allows us to fully analyze the phenomenon and anything that's happening to see if it's credibly anomalous, right? Just like Mick West, you need somebody to challenge theories and really scrutinize the evidence that's out there. But when they get proven wrong, that's important too. And I think those people should be able to stand up and say, okay, I was wrong about that, but I'm right about this, right?
Sure, of course.
That's the real difference here that we need. And I think you had guys like Philip J. Klass. I made a documentary called Who Saw the Men in Black, and just kind of profile all of these ways of controlling information throughout the decades in regards to the UFO topic. And Philip J. Klass was apparently, you know, through Stanton Friedman and Kathleen Marden's work, they revealed that they wrote a book about how information control was done, and Philip J. Klass had tried to bribe Travis Walton's friend $10,000 to say that he made everything up.
Wow.
Yeah, like
I didn't know that.
He apparently was pretty well financed by an intelligence agency as well. So
go figure.
yeah, I mean, it's history repeats itself.
Yeah.
NASA debunking UFOs, or saying that they're interested and that they're going to look into it. The Condon report, Edward Condon, he was a very credible scientist. He served the same purpose during the Project Blue Book days, you know? And then you had Alan J. Hynek doing the same thing, which later on he left that and was convinced something's actually happening here, right? So I don't know, history repeats itself, but as you said, I think we live in the age of information like no other time before. And the internet helps us really communicate efficiently and get to the bottom of the truth better than ever before. And the only thing that could really stop that is if we had some kind of 9/11 type attack in the next few months, where national security is of the utmost importance and your liberties and freedoms get taken away from you.
Copy that. Well, hopefully we won't be having any of that anytime soon. Science Bob chimed in here and left a nice super chat. Hello to my good friend Darcy and Matt is killing it killing long it right now. Not sure what he meant there, but anyway, Science Bob, love Science Bob. Mark O'Connell, a question. This is a good one. Has there been any collisions at sea with USOs?
Not that I know of. Just that submarine that went missing in the Bermuda Triangle we discussed earlier is what I know of. I need to dig into these cases that Richard Dolan has submitted to me, and Tim Gallaudet is looking into this stuff too. look out for a possible paper he's publishing later this month. But we have had submarines crash into seamounts and mountains, and we cover some of that in the documentary.
Got it. Got it. Okay, so where can people find your movie? Transmedium, Fastmovers, and USOs.
Yeah, right now it is available on Amazon Prime, Apple TV, Vudu, Google Play, and a few other streaming platforms, but it might open up as the months go on. I know that it's internationally in places like Britain and throughout other English-speaking countries, but it'll usually opens up a bit more after a few months. So sorry if there's some folks that haven't been able to see it in other countries.
Awesome. And folks, I would encourage you, when you after you watch this film, please leave a good review. You know, as Darcy talked about, there are organized groups that are clearly, in my opinion, being paid to to defame people like yourself, and we see it right and left, and so even like on my show, when I say leave a thumbs up, leave a review, click like, all that kind of stuff. What a lot of people don't realize when it comes to whatever platform that is, be it a podcasting platform or IMDb or YouTube or Twitter, when, just like speaking for YouTube, when people go, like when you watch YouTube, you see other creators as well say, smash that thumbs up button and all of that. And before I started producing stuff, I had no idea that any of that was important. But all of these platforms, they look at the reviews, they look at how many thumbs up, they look at how many comments, they look at all of that stuff, and then the algorithm for whatever that platform is, those signals are what they use to decide whether to promote that content to people that may not otherwise watch it. So doing those sorts of things are super important for helping people like Darcy and myself and other people that are out there putting this stuff out. So when you go to the effort of typing a review, all that kind of stuff, it helps promote it, it helps get more eyeballs on it, and then also as well, it is a good way of countering the people that are out there trying to silence the message by, for instance, in your case, leaving poor reviews. And yeah, I haven't watched any of your other stuff, but I watched this, and man, it was phenomenal. So to me, it's pretty clear that that they're doing it as a disinformation operation. So anyway, well, thank you.
That gang employs the same tactics. They have their followers or cult members basically bomb every of their detractors, but then prop up all of their comments and their releases and stuff. So you'll see that throughout time, that this is like the new way of brigading and controlling the narrative.
That is for sure. So Darcy, where can folks find you on social media? In addition, we told people where to find you find your films. Where can we find you on social media?
Yeah, on my studio, as scary as it sounds to some people, is called Occult Journeys. So you can find me on Instagram and actually on Twitter as @Occult Journeys. My website is occultjourneys.com, where you can check out some of my other films. And then on Instagram, I'm just Darcy Weir Films, and everywhere else I'm Darcy Weir.
Awesome. Actually, excellent. And actually, I got a separate message from our good friend David Smethurst. If you have a few more minutes, he has some really excellent questions I'd love to put to you.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so David says, what is Darcy's view of the extent of the underwater NHI infrastructure across the world? Has activity from USOs increased in the last decade, and has he heard of any no-go zones for the U.S. Navy? Wow, that's a great one.
Yeah, I have not heard of any no-go zones. I know that there's a lot of activity off the coast of the Catalina Island. There's been a ton of stuff in the Baltic Sea near Russia. There's things in the Black Sea that have been seen off the coast in the Atlantic. As I said, the Bermuda Triangle area off the coast of Puerto Rico is a hot spot. Near Hawaii, there's been a ton of stuff off the coast of San Francisco and throughout California off the coast there. And Nova Scotia, east coast of Canada, we've seen things, so it seems to be pretty worldwide. I'd love to hear about more cases that come out of like the Indian Ocean or near Australia, that type of thing. Frederick Valantage, his flight went missing some time ago off the coast of Australia. I don't know if he crashed it or, was disappeared or something. But yeah, there's lots of interesting places, but I think the Bermuda Triangle is one of those that's like highly anomalous.
Yeah, that makes sense. As a kid, I loved watching documentaries in the 70s about the Bermuda Triangle and all of that. There was a series narrated by the late Leonard Nimoy, who was, of course, Captain Spock or Mr. Spock on Star Trek. But yeah, that was such a fascinating thing. Another great question from Dave Smethurst. What does Darcy think of the impact of David Grush's testimony on the UAP narrative and what impact it has on the focus of your particular work?
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I incorporated some of his testimony from the landmark congressional hearing he took part in, last year. I think he is incredibly important to the disclosure that's unfolded and should continue to unfold. My research will usually just lead me wherever I'm hearing stories coming out of. And I think the USO topic is something that's a little bit overlooked. It's not as well highlighted. That's why I decided to focus on that for this feature, and I will for another feature coming up. But I think David Grush knows more about the USO activity and what possibly is in our oceans in terms of infrastructure that's of non-human origin.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me at all. Okay, Darcy Weir, director of Transmedium Fastmovers and USOs. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, man. Good to be here.
Okay, yeah, great. All right, folks. Thanks for joining us. So if you enjoyed our show, please tell your friends about us on social media. The more people that watch, the more we can spread our message on this important topic. And we will see you next week with more great guests on the Good Trouble Show. Everyone have a great rest of your Sunday.